My name is Simone Pruitt, and I'm 34 years old. I close real estate transactions for a living. I have reviewed contracts worth $40 million while eating a sandwich at my desk. I can read a clause buried on page 31 of a purchase agreement and tell you in 30 seconds whether it will cost someone their house. I know what a trap looks like before it springs. I did not see this one coming. Or rather, I saw all the pieces and told myself I was wrong. That is the part I have had to sit with. 6 weeks ago, my younger sister Renee got engaged. The proposal was on a Sunday. By Wednesday, my mother had called me 4 times. My aunt had texted me a screenshot of a bridal venue with a price tag I will get to, and my stepfather had left a voicemail that began with the words, "Simone, as the most financially established member of this family, I did not call any of them back that Wednesday." I was in the middle of a title dispute for a commercial property in Fulton County, and I needed to think. That is what I do when something feels wrong and I cannot immediately name why. I think by Thursday morning, I had received a link to a wedding planning website, a suggested florist in Buckhead, and a PDF of a venue contract someone had already begun filling out. The contract had my name typed into the billing field. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called my therapist. Then I called my paralegal, not because I needed legal help, but because Deja has known me for 6 years, and she has never once told me I was overreacting. She looked at the PDF I forwarded her. She typed back in 40 seconds, "Simone, run." I did not run. I drove to my mother's house on Saturday instead, because I'm 34 years old and I have never figured out how to be a coward about the things that matter. And because somewhere underneath the contract with my name pre-typed into the billing field, Renee was my sister, and I loved her, and I wanted to be at her wedding. I just was not going to fund it. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, and what I overheard through a wall that changed everything, and what I said at the end of a Sunday dinner that made my stepfather's smile disappear in real time, let me take you back to where this started. Because this did not start with Renee's engagement. It started 22 years ago with a lesson my family taught me so well, I spent a decade unlearning it. If you're new here, welcome to Still Waters Drama. Please subscribe and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every one now. Let me take you back to Atlanta. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, in a house that was always warm and always a little short. Not poor, not exactly, but the kind of family where you learn before you are 10 years old that money is a source of friction and silence, and the conversations adults have in rooms you're not supposed to hear through. My mother, Claudette, was a licensed practical nurse who worked double shifts and came home smelling like hospital soap and wore her exhaustion like something she had decided to stop apologizing for. She was a good mother. She was also a woman who had grown up believing that family was a communal resource, that what one person had belonged to all of them, and that the highest expression of love was to give until the giving hurt and then give a little more. She remarried when I was 12. My stepfather, Vincent, was a man with large plans and a particular talent for finding reasons those plans had not yet worked out. He sold insurance for a while. Then he managed a car rental location. Then he had a business idea that required a loan I would not learn about until I was 19. He was not cruel. He was charming and loud and told good stories, and called me his bonus daughter in a way that was warm enough that it took me years to notice it. Mostly came out when he needed something. My sister Renee arrived when I was 13, from my mother's second marriage. She was born easy in the way some people are born easy. Beautiful, soft-spoken with my mother's smile and Vincent's gift for making you feel like the most important person in the room. I loved her immediately and completely. I still do. What I did not love, and what I spent years not naming, was the way the family organized itself around Renee's comfort, the way it had never organized itself around mine. I was the responsible one. This was said as a compliment. Simone is so responsible. Simone is the dependable one. Simone will figure it out. Simone handles things. It was said with pride, the way you say it when you mean to stop there. What nobody said was the rest of the sentence. Simone will handle it so the rest of us do not have to. I graduated high school with a full academic scholarship to UGA. My mother cried at the ceremony. Vincent shook my hand and said, "Now you can really start helping this family." I was 7. I did not know what that sentence meant yet. I was about to learn. First semester of college. My mother called to say the water heater had gone out. I sent $300 from my work study money. Second semester, Vincent needed a security deposit on a new office space for the insurance business he was relaunching. I did not send that one. He did not speak to me for 2 weeks. By junior year, I had developed a system. I paid for the things that would keep my mother comfortable and said no to everything Vincent framed as an investment opportunity, which I had learned to translate as money I will not return. I went to law school at Emory on a partial scholarship and loans I paid off myself over 7 years. I clerked. I worked at a mid-size firm. I made partner track at 31 at a real estate law firm in Midtown Atlanta. By 34, I was closing significant transactions, managing a team of 4, and living in a condo I owned outright in Inman Park, with a kitchen I had renovated exactly the way I wanted it, because I had earned the right to make decisions about my own kitchen without consulting a committee. My family knew I was successful. They tracked it the way certain families track the one who got out, with a mixture of pride and a running calculation of what it might mean for them. Vincent had borrowed money from me twice. I had agreed once and declined once. He had not spoken easily to me since the second time, which was fine. We developed a surface warmth that worked at holidays and broke down anywhere deeper. Renee had borrowed money from me once for a car repair and paid it back in 4 months without being asked. She was the only person in my family who had ever done that. I had held it as evidence of who she was when she was operating on her own. The question was whether the person she was on her own was the same person she was when Vincent and my mother were in the room. That question was about to be answered. Renee called me on a Sunday evening in late October. She was crying, but the good kind, the kind that sounds like laughing underneath. She said, "Simone, he asked me." I said, "Tell me everything." She did. His name was Darius. They had been together for 2 years. He was a physical therapist with his own practice, the kind of man who, based on everything Renee had told me, showed up when he said he would and meant what he said. He had proposed at the restaurant where they had their first date with a ring that was modest and exactly right. Renee had said yes before he finished the sentence. I was genuinely happy. I want to say that clearly because everything that came after could make it sound like I was not, and that would not be true. I loved my sister and I was glad she had found someone worthy of her. I said, "Renee, I am so happy for you." She said, "I want you there, Simone, at everything. You're my maid of honor. If you'll do it." I said, "Of course I will." She said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too." We stayed on the phone another 40 minutes talking about Darius and the ring and what she wanted the wedding to feel like. She wanted something real. She kept saying, not big and performed, real. Flowers that actually smelled like flowers. A meal that was actually good. People she actually loved in one room. I went to bed that Sunday thinking about what dress I would wear standing beside my sister at her wedding. By Wednesday, my mother had called me 4 times and I knew something was wrong. Claudette Pruitt called me the way she calls when she has an agenda and has not yet decided how to present it. Twice to warm up the line, once to float the topic, once to land. I had been her daughter long enough to know the pattern. Call 1, just checking in, baby. Can you believe Renee? We are all so excited. Call 2, have you two talked about the wedding? She has such good taste. I always knew she'd want something special. Call 3. Vincent and I were just saying that as a family, we want this to be a real celebration. Something Renee will always remember. Call 4. Simone, you know you're the one who can make this happen for her? You're her big sister. That 4th call, I let go to voicemail. I played it twice. Then I opened the PDF my aunt had sent, which I had not yet addressed. The venue was a restored estate in Roswell. I knew the property. I had reviewed the deed transfer on a commercial adjacent parcel 2 years prior. The main hall seated 250. The weekend package included catering coordination, floral staging, valet, and a bridal suite. The base rate was listed at $17,000. With the add-ons my aunt had already checked on the inquiry form, The estimate at the bottom read $26,400. My name was in the billing contact field. Simone Pruitt. My work email, which my mother had. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, looking at that PDF. In my professional life, I review documents that bind people to things they did not fully understand when they signed. I see it regularly. A clause that looked like a formality. A term that seemed standard until the circumstances changed. A signature that a person thought meant one thing and meant something else entirely. What I was looking at was a contract that someone had begun filling out in my name without telling me. For an event I had not been asked about at a venue I had not been consulted on. For a guest list that had already grown in my aunt's folder to include people I was not sure Renee had personally invited. I did not call my mother back that night. I went for a walk instead. The kind where you put your phone in your pocket and let your body cover ground while your mind does the actual work. By the time I got home, I had named what I was feeling. Not anger, not yet. More like the particular clarity that comes when a document finally says out loud what the subtext had been saying for years. The family did not want me at Renee's wedding. They wanted my credit card at Renee's wedding. The invitation to be maid of honor was the sweetener. The billing field was the ask. I just needed to decide what I was going to do about it. And I needed to do it carefully. Because Renee was real to me, even if the strategy around her was not. I drove to my mother's house the following Saturday. I want to explain why. Because the people in my life who know this story have asked, Deja asked, my friend Tasha asked, my therapist, Dr. Ose, asked in the calm and specific way she asks things that she already knows the answer to and wants me to find myself. I went because I needed information before I made a decision. I'm an attorney. I do not respond to a contract until I have read the full file. I had a PDF and 4 voicemails. That was not the full file. I also went because I missed my mother, not the project manager who called 4 times with a building agenda. The woman who made biscuits from scratch on Saturday mornings and kept a small radio in the kitchen tuned to the old soul station and sometimes danced a little when she thought no one was watching. That woman was real and I loved her, and she lived in the same body as the other one, and I had never fully figured out how to hold both of them at once. My mother's house was a 3-bedroom ranch in Decatur that she had owned for 19 years. The yard had improved steadily since Vincent had stopped trying to maintain it himself, and my mother had hired a service. The kitchen smelled like coffee and the good fabric softener she had used since I was a child. Renee was there when I arrived, so was Vincent. So was my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, who had sent me the PDF and who was the family's institutional memory for every celebration going back to 1987. The mood was warm. Renee hugged me at the door and she was glowing the way people glow in the early weeks of an engagement, before the planning starts and the warmth gets replaced by logistics. Darius was not there. I noticed that. The man Renee was marrying was not at the table where his wedding was apparently being planned. We ate lunch. My mother made her baked chicken and rice, the recipe I have never successfully replicated in my own kitchen despite trying 15 times, and a green salad and biscuits and sweet tea in the good glasses she only used for company or family she was trying to soften. The conversation was light for the first hour. Renee's ring. The proposal story, told again with different details emphasized depending on who is telling it. Vincent's jokes, which were better than usual, which I noted. He was performing. After the plates were cleared, Aunt Patricia produced a folder. It was a thick one, tabbed, organized. The kind of folder a woman who has planned 4 family weddings and 2 retirement parties produces naturally, the way I produce red-lined contracts. She opened it to a page I recognized as a printout of the venue website, the Roswell Estate. She said, "Now, I've been doing some research, and I think this is the one. Renee, you should see it." Renee looked at it. She said, honestly, genuinely, "That's beautiful, Aunt Pat." But Darius and I were thinking something a little more. Patricia talked over her gently. "It's perfect for the family. You don't want something small, baby. You only do this once." Renee looked at me. Something moved across her face. Not unhappiness exactly, more like a person realizing the conversation had started without them and was moving too fast to catch. I looked at the folder. I looked at my mother, who was watching me with the particular expression she wore when she wanted me to agree to something and was trying to look like she was not. I looked at Vincent, who was refilling his sweet tea with elaborate casualness. I said, "What's the budget?" The room rearranged itself slightly. Aunt Patricia turned a page. Mom looked at the table. Vincent set down his glass. Renee said, "We haven't really landed on." Patricia said, "That's actually something we wanted to talk about as a family." There was that word. Family. I said, "Okay, let's talk about it." What followed was 20 minutes of the most sophisticated financial misdirection I had encountered outside of a title fraud case. My aunt talked about what Renee deserved. My mother talked about what the family name meant in their community. Vincent talked about how a wedding was an investment in a marriage, which was a sentence so structurally confused that I almost stopped him to ask him to walk me through it. Nobody said a number. Nobody said my name. But the billing PDF was still in my email, and everyone in that room had been CC'd on something I had not been shown. I let them talk. I took a mental inventory. I asked clarifying questions the way I ask clarifying questions in a deposition, calmly without revealing what I already knew, giving each person enough rope to show me exactly where they stood. By the time the sweet tea was gone, I had a clear picture of what was being proposed without anyone having proposed it directly. The family would plan the wedding. Renee and Darius would choose the details. The bill would come to me framed not as a request, but as a natural consequence of being the most financially established member of the family, a phrase Vincent finally used out loud at the 40-minute mark, which I wrote down in the Notes app on my phone while nodding. I drove home that afternoon and did not call anyone. I made a pot of coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I ran the numbers that no one had run in that room. $26,000 for the venue, catering for 250 guests at a reasonable per head came to another 15. Flowers, music, photographer, officiant, cake, invitations, dress alterations, rehearsal dinner if they expected that too. I built a line item estimate the way I would build a cost projection for a client. The total, conservatively, was $62,000. $62,000 for an event I had not been asked about, at a venue I had not been consulted on, for a guest list that had already grown in my aunt's folder to include people I was not sure. Renee had personally invited. I closed the laptop, I went to bed. I did not say no yet. I was not ready to say no yet, because I had learned in years of practice that the worst time to make a decision is when you're holding information but not all of it. And there was a conversation happening that I had not yet heard. 4 days later, I drove back to Decatur. Not for lunch this time, for a reason I'm going to explain. Renee had texted me the night before. She said, "Can you come over tomorrow, just you and me? I want to talk without the whole committee." That sentence told me something important. My sister knew. Maybe not everything, but she knew the conversation Saturday had not been entirely about her. I said, "I'll be there at 2. When I arrived, my mother's car was in the driveway. Renee had said just the two of us, and I had assumed that meant she had arranged privacy. I knocked. Renee answered, looking slightly harried. She said, "Mom's here, but she's in the back on a call. Come in." We sat in the living room. Renee had made tea, which she only does when she is nervous, and she was twisting a thread on the hem of her sweater the way she has done since she was 8 years old when she had something to say that she did not know how to start saying. She said, "I need you to know that Darius and I have a budget." I said, "Good. What is it?" She said, 15,000 total, between both families. His parents are contributing 5. We were hoping my family could do the same. And then we cover the rest ourselves. She looked at me. She said, "I know what they've been telling you, or implying, whatever the word is, and I want you to know that is not what I asked for. I didn't ask for the Roswell place. I didn't ask for 250 people. I asked if you would be my maid of honor, and that is all I asked you for." I looked at my sister. 34 years old, and I felt 21 for just a moment. Watching the 13-year-old I had known in the original version of this conversation, the one where she had always been the one receiving. I said, "Renee, I believe you." She exhaled. I said, But I need you to know that there is a version of this weekend being planned that you may not be fully aware of. And before anything moves forward, I need to understand where it is coming from. She said, meaning Mom and Vincent. I said, and Aunt Patricia. She nodded slowly. That was when we heard it. My mother's voice came through the wall from the back bedroom, where she had been on her call. The house was a ranch. The walls were standard drywall from 1974. Claudette Pruitt was not a woman who spoke quietly when she was energized, and she was currently energized. We could hear her clearly. We were sitting in the living room, and she was in the room 10 feet away, and the sound traveled the way sound travels in a house that was built before insulation standards required much thought about. What you might not want to broadcast, I heard my mother's voice say, "She'll do it. She always does. We just have to make her feel like it's for Renee." A pause. Whoever was on the other end was speaking? My mother again. "Patricia, I know, but you cannot ask Simone directly. That's when she says no. You have to let her feel like she arrived at it herself. That's how she works." Another pause. Then Vincent already talked to the venue. He told them Simone Pruitt would be the billing contact. They're holding the date. A longer pause. Something was said that I couldn't hear fully. A word or two. My mother. She's a lawyer. She does big deals. $60,000 is nothing to her. She spends that on a case. I was sitting completely still. Renee had gone the color of someone who had just been told something they half knew but had been hoping to not fully know. Her hands were flat on her knees. My mother, one more sentence, clear through the wall. "She'll be upset for a week, and then she'll come around. She always comes around. That's Simone." I heard the call end. I heard the sound of my mother putting her phone down on the nightstand. Then quiet. Renee looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything for a full 30 seconds. Then Renee said very quietly, "I didn't know about the venue." I said, "I know." She said, "She told me you had offered to help. She said it was your idea." Something cold moved through me. Not surprise. The absence of surprise, which is sometimes its own kind of cold. I said, "It was not my idea." Renee pressed her fingers to her forehead. She said, "I am so sorry." I said, "You don't have to apologize for this." She said, "I am apologizing because I should have asked you directly. I let myself believe it because I wanted to believe it." I looked at my sister. She was not wrong, but she was not the architect of this, and she was not going to be the person I made pay for it. I said, "What do you actually want? Not what Aunt Patricia's folder says. Not what Mom planned. What do you want?" She said, "I want to marry Darius in front of the people who love us. I want good food and a dance floor and my sister in the front row. That's it." I said, "Then that is what we are going to build." She looked at me. I said, "But first I need to have a conversation with your mother, and I need you to let me do it my way." She nodded. She did not ask what my way was. She already knew. I want to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, why didn't you just leave? Walk out, go home, block the number, let them figure it out. I hear that. I have thought about it. There is a version of this story where that is the right answer, where the cost of showing up is too high and the only healthy choice is to stop paying it. But Renee was real. And what I had just witnessed was not my sister conspiring against me. It was my sister being used as leverage, the same way I had been used as a resource, without her full knowledge or consent. We were on the same side of this, separated only by a wall we had not known was thin enough to hear through. I was not going to let my family use my sister's wedding to take $62,000 from me. But I was also not going to blow up my sister's engagement to protect my bank account. There was a third option. I was going to exercise it. If you have ever been the person a family builds its plans around without telling you, drop a comment. Tell me where you are in this story. And subscribe if you have not yet, because what I said at that Sunday dinner is the part I have never told anyone outside of this recording. I asked Renee to give me until Sunday. She looked uncertain, but she agreed. Then I drove home and I did 4 things. First, I called the Roswell Estate venue directly. I identified myself, said I understood a reservation had been placed with my name in the billing field, and asked them to confirm. They confirmed. I told them clearly and politely that I had not authorized this reservation, that my name had been entered without my consent, and that they should contact whoever had initiated the inquiry to clarify. Billing before proceeding, the woman I spoke with was professional. She said she understood and would flag the file. I thanked her. Second, I emailed my own attorney not to take legal action, to create a paper record of the call and to ask one question. Did entering someone's name in a billing field without their consent constitute anything worth documenting? The answer came back. Not a crime, but worth keeping a record of, particularly if the pattern continued. Third, I called Deja, my paralegal, who listened to the entire account without interrupting and then said, "So what do you need from me?" I said, "I need you to talk me down from saying something I'll regret." She said, "Simone, you're not going to say anything you'll regret. You're going to say exactly what needs to be said and nothing more. You always do. That's your whole thing." She was right. That is my whole thing. Fourth, I called Dr. Osei. I told her what I had heard through the wall. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question she always asks when I'm holding something difficult. She said, "What do you need to say?" I thought about it. I said, "I need them to hear that I am not a funding mechanism. That I'm a person they are related to and a person gets to decide what they do with $62,000. And I have decided." She said, "And if they don't hear it," I said, "they'll hear it anyway. I'll just have said it." Sunday dinner at my mother's house was a tradition that had survived years of tension and distance, and the particular strain that comes from a family that loves each other and also has complicated feelings about money. We did it most months. It was almost always good food and almost always had at least one moment where I wondered why I came and then remembered why immediately after. This Sunday, I arrived at 6. My mother was in the kitchen. Vincent was in the living room watching football. Renee and Darius were there, which surprised me. Darius meeting my eyes with the steady, grounded expression of a man who had been briefed. Aunt Patricia was not there, which I took as intentional on Renee's part. My mother set the table. Roast chicken, collard greens, cornbread, the works. She was warm. She was performing warmth the way she did when she was working toward something, and the performance was good enough that if I had not heard her through a wall 4 days earlier, I might have settled into it. We ate. The conversation moved through Renee and Darius, through Darius's practice, through football with Vincent, through a neighborhood thing my mother was involved with at church. Normal. Warm. A family at a table. Dessert was peach cobbler. My mother's best thing. She set it in the center of the table with the same quiet satisfaction she always had when a meal had come out. Right. The satisfaction of a woman who feeds people as an act of love, even when everything around the table is complicated. Vincent was the one who raised it. He always was. He said, "So, we should talk about the wedding." The table adjusted. Renee looked at her cobbler. Darius set down his spoon. My mother looked at me with the expression I had cataloged over 34 years, warm, expectant, already reassured. Vincent said, "Simone, we were thinking as a family that we'd like to do this right for Renee. You know what she means to all of us. And you've done so well. We're proud of you. We've always been proud of you." He was good. The pride first. The pride was always first. He said, "The venue Patricia found is perfect, holds everybody, beautiful property, and the date is available. We just need to confirm billing, and it's done." He looked at me with the easy confidence of a man who had already decided how this conversation ended. I set my spoon down. I looked at my mother. I looked at Vincent. I looked at Renee, who was watching me with something that might have been held breath. I said, "I know about the call, Mom." My mother's face did not change immediately. That was the tell. A person who had nothing to hide changes their face. My mother held hers for 2 full seconds, which in a live conversation is a very long time. Then she said, "What call?" I said, "Thursday. The bedroom. You were talking to Aunt Patricia. A beat." Vincent looked at my mother. My mother looked at the cobbler. I said, "I was in the living room with Renee. The walls in this house are thin. You said you had to make me feel like I arrived at the decision myself. That's how I work, you said. You said $60,000 was nothing to me. You said I always come around. The table was quiet. I said, I'm not coming around. Vincent opened his mouth. I held up one hand, not toward him, just a pause. I said, I want to say this once, clearly so everyone at this table understands. I said, I love Renee. I am honored to be her maid of honor. I will be at her wedding in the front row in whatever dress she wants me in, at whatever venue she and Darius have chosen together. I looked at Renee when I said that part. She nodded once, eyes steady. I said, what I will not do is fund an event that was planned without my knowledge, in my name, on behalf of people who did not ask me. The venue in Roswell has been notified that the billing contact was entered without my authorization. That reservation is on hold until someone who actually intends to pay for it confirms it. My mother made a sound. I looked at her. I said, Mom. She looked at me. I said, I heard you say this isn't asking for money, it's letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her this chance. The words landed. I watched them land. My mother's face did something I had not seen it do in years. The performance fell off. Just for a moment, maybe 5 seconds, the warmth and the management and the careful arrangement disappeared, and what was underneath was something older and smaller and more honest. She said, Simone, I did not mean. I said, I think you did. I think you meant exactly that, and I think you have believed it for a long time. A long silence. Darius, who had not spoken, said quietly to Renee, You okay? She nodded. Vincent said, We're just trying to do right by our daughter. I looked at him. I said, Vincent, your daughter has a budget. It is $15,000. Her fiancé's family is contributing $5. She is asking her family to contribute $5. That is the number Renee chose. That is the wedding Renee wants. He started to speak. I said, I will contribute $5,000 to Renee's wedding, directly to an account Renee controls, for whatever she and Darius decide to spend it on. That is my gift to my sister. Renee's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. I said, I will not pay for a Roswell estate or a guest list that no one consulted Renee about, or a version of this event that is more about what this family wants to be seen doing than what Renee actually asked for. My mother said, You always have to make things so hard. I said, No, I make things clear. There is a difference. She looked at the table. I said, Mom, I know things are tight. I know the house has been a strain. I know there are things you have not told me about that I could probably see in the numbers. If you let me look, I'm not your enemy. I'm not withholding myself from this family. I'm refusing to be managed out of my own resources by people who love me and are also sometimes not honest with me about what they need. She looked up. I said, If you need help, tell me you need help. Sit down with me and tell me the actual number and the actual situation, and I will look at it with you like a person who loves you and also knows how to read a financial document. That is a conversation I'm willing to have. She said nothing. I said, but a venue contract filled out in my name is not a conversation. It is a conclusion, and I do not sign conclusions. I review them first. The room stayed quiet for a while. The cobbler cooled in the dish. The football game murmured from the living room where no one had gone back to watch it. Then something unexpected happened. My mother started crying. Not the performed kind, not the volume for sympathy kind I knew from years of navigating this. The real kind, small and tight, and the kind that happens when a person has been holding something in such a particular position for so long that the moment it shifts, the body does not know what to do with the release. She said, I did not know how to ask you. I said, I know. She said, you always seemed like you had everything handled. You seemed like you did not need us. And we needed you, and I did not know how to say we needed you. So I tried to. She stopped. I said, engineer it. She said, yes. I said, Mom, I always needed you. I just stopped waiting for you to show up that way because the showing up I kept getting was the kind with an agenda. But the need did not go away. It just went quiet. She wiped her face with the edge of her napkin. The nice napkins she only put out for family. Renee reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Then she looked at me. She said, $5,000 is more than I asked for. I said, you didn't ask for anything. That's why I'm giving it. She laughed. It was the real laugh, the eyes crinkling kind. Darius smiled at his plate. Vincent, who had been unusually still for the last 10 minutes, said, I owe you an apology, Simone. I looked at him. He said, I have taken advantage of your generosity more than once. I told myself it was family. It was not always family. Sometimes it was just easier than figuring out another way. And that was not right. I sat with that. He was not a man who apologized easily or often. I could feel the weight of what it cost him. I said, thank you for saying that. He nodded. He picked up his cobbler spoon and ate a bite and stared at the table. My mother said, I'll call Patricia tomorrow and tell her the Roswell venue is off the table. I said, Renee can make that call if she wants to. It's her wedding. Renee said, oh, I will make that call. I have been wanting to make that call for 2 weeks. I drove home that night in the quiet I have come to recognize as the specific quiet of a conversation that actually happened. Not the silence of things avoided, the silence of things said. Deja texted me the next morning. How did it go? I wrote back. I said what needed saying. Nobody's dead. That's a win. She sent back a single fax. The wedding is in the spring. Renee and Darius chose a private event space in Decatur. A renovated warehouse with exposed brick and good lighting and a kitchen that lets you bring your own caterer. They found a woman who does seasonal Southern menus for weddings, the kind of food that is actually good, Renee's word. The guest list is 81 people. Everyone on it is someone Renee personally wanted there. The total budget is $14,000. Darius's parents contributed $5,000. My mother and Vincent contributed $3,000, which was what they could actually manage. And I respect that they did it honestly instead of through a PDF with my name on it. I contributed $5,000 directly to Renee's account, as I said I would. Renee called me the week after she locked the venue. She said, it's exactly what I wanted. I said, I know. She said, how did you know? I said, because you said it the night of the engagement. Real flowers, good food, people you love, you knew what you wanted. They just talked over it. She was quiet a moment. She said, I'm going to stop letting them talk over it. I said, yes, you are. 3 things have changed since that Sunday dinner. My mother called me 2 weeks later and told me the actual situation. Not the managed version, not the envelope under the table version. The real one. She and Vincent had leaned on a home equity line during the years when Vincent's business was not working, and the line was maxed, and the payments had become a source of the kind of stress that lives in a body and shows up sideways. She told me the number. I looked at it with her, on the phone, like 2 adults. We made a plan that she can actually execute. I did not pay it. I helped her build a path. There's a difference, and she is learning to see it. Vincent has not borrowed money from me since. He started doing some consulting work for a property management company. Not a reinvention, but a practical step. The kind of step you take when you stop waiting for the version of things you wanted and start working with the version that's in front of you. I respect that too. Renee and I talk every week now. Not about the wedding, about everything else. Her practice sessions with Darius for their first dance, which they are apparently doing to an Etta James song in which she says Darius is taking extremely seriously. The apartment they are looking at. The small arguments that reveal the small differences that are not problems yet, just edges of 2 people learning where they end and the other one begins. She said to me last week, Simone, I need to ask you something. I said, ask me. She said, would you teach me how to read a contract before we sign the apartment lease? I said, yes, absolutely yes. She said, I want to be someone who reads the whole thing. I said, I know, that's why I'm teaching you. I have been a real estate attorney for 9 years. I have closed transactions worth more than I will say out loud in this story. I have read clauses that moved property between hands and clauses that protected people from having property taken, and clauses that failed to protect people because no one read them carefully enough. The most important contract I have ever reviewed was the one my family had been writing about me for years, without showing me the terms. The clause they relied on, Simone always comes around. The amendment I filed on a Sunday evening over peach cobbler, she does not. And she never did. She just stopped saying so. A contract is only binding if both parties understood what they were agreeing to. I had been performing agreement for years without having read the document. The night I read it, the night I said out loud what the terms actually were and what I would and would not sign, was the night the contract changed. Not terminated, changed. Because my mother is still my mother. Because Renee is getting married in the spring and I will be in the front row in a dress we chose together and the flowers will actually smell like flowers. Because Vincent made a hard apology that cost him something, and I received it without pretending it erased the history, but also without pretending it meant nothing. Because family is a living document. The terms are always being negotiated. The question is whether you're in the room when it happens. I'm in the room now, on my own terms. That is my story. A PDF with my name in the billing field. A phone call through a thin wall. 2 sentences that redirected a $62,000 assumption. One Sunday dinner where I said the thing I had been practicing for 20 years. If you are the one your family has written into the billing field without asking, I want you to know. You are allowed to read the document. You are allowed to mark it up. You're allowed to say, these terms do not work for me, and here's what I will actually sign. You are not the bank. You are a person they are lucky to have at the table. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Tell me if you have ever had to redirect a plan that was built around your money and not your actual self. Tell me what you said or what you wish you had said. Share this with someone who is reading the fine print on something their family handed them and wondering if they are allowed to say no. They are. They always were. Subscribe if you have not. Still waters run deep. I will see you in the next one.